From News on 6, this is Breaking News.
Good evening, I'm Lori Fulbright. We are covering breaking news right now as the jury has just sentenced David Ware to death for murdering Tulsa Police Sergeant Craig Johnson in 2020. News on 6's Reagan Ledbetter was just in the courtroom for the verdict and is now live from the courthouse with the reaction. Reagan?
Yeah, Lori, that jury read the verdict of the death penalty for David Ware. I looked immediately over at David Ware. Absolutely no emotion. Deputies just walked him out of the courtroom a couple minutes ago. The courtroom completely silent. A lot of family from Sergeant Craig Johnson was in there, and we're actually about to speak with Sergeant Craig Johnson's widow in a couple minutes, so we'll have that for you. I think we're actually going to step into that right now. If you can come over here for a second. This would be Christy Johnson. This would be Sergeant Craig Johnson's widow.
I want to thank the TPD community and our friends and family for all of their support throughout everything. I want to thank the jury for all of their time and attention they have given to the case. I know they had to see a lot of hard things that I imagine will be with them for a long time. I pray they are able to heal from the experience. I thank the DA's office for all of their hard work. My request at this time is that the silent majority that I have seen and heard from during all of this start speaking up and change the anti-police culture being created. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Chief.
Go ahead. Steve. Mr. Attorney.
Steve Kunzweiler.
So, first and foremost, my thoughts and feelings right now are for Sergeant Johnson's family. His mom and his dad didn't deserve to go through this. His wife and his children didn't deserve to go through this. And I'm confident that the success that we had today and with this verdict, they would trade that for just 1 second more time that they could have with Craig. It is an absolute tragedy is what Mr. Gray said to this jury, and that's never going to change for those folks. My thoughts also are with Officer Zarkshian. He was the hero in this case. He is a tremendous example of the men and women who the Tulsa Police Department and all our law enforcement communities strive to hire and put out on our streets. I think in many respects what Officer Zarkshian did was helped us find the guy who killed Sergeant Johnson. And as I'd said before, watching those videos, I know that this was a hard burden we placed on these jurors, an awful burden. They did their job. My prayers really will go for them because in a world in which we have so many wonders with technology, the one downside of technology is they got to see things that they should never have to see again. And my prayers are for them that they can put this aspect of it behind them.
Steve, how proud are you of the jurors? You've said this is a case that's impacted the whole Tulsa community. They're part of that community, and they were able to come in here and see and hear those things that you've said and go through this.
Well, as Mr. Gray had said in his closing argument, they were some of the most attentive people, and I've been doing jury trials for 30 years. They were some of the most attentive people. They paid close attention. We never had a delay. They were respectful throughout the process. Truly a testament to our community. I was proud to be able to put a case on in front of them. I was and ever thankful for them. Hopefully I just don't have to encounter them in the future. I don't want them seeing me and being reminded of what they had to do. I hope that they can move on with their lives.
Steve, I know it's not easy for you to have to go after the death penalty. I can't imagine that either, but this was such a heinous crime. Do you feel like justice has been served?
Well, I've worked for Mr. Tim Harris, the district attorney, before, and one of the things he taught me was there's only one person that puts his name on a line that says, I want a jury to give consideration for the death penalty, and that's the elected DA. And so I took that responsibility very importantly. Not every murder case warrants consideration for the death penalty, but when I put my name down on that, I knew what I was going to be asking, 12 tried and true, and obviously we put that on them to ultimately make the decision, but I had to be committed in my own heart that I believe that this was a case that warranted the death penalty, and I'm grateful that they did their deliberations with thoughtful consideration. We asked them, Mr. Gray asked them, do your job and do it not out of some kind of reaction, but to do it given thoughtful consideration. It's obvious the time they spent that they really went through all the evidence.
Thank you. Chief Franklin, do you have anything?
Kevin?
You want to step up?
Yeah, sure. The jury did its job. District Attorney Coonsweiler and ADA Gray, they did their jobs, and they took what we do out on the street and brought it into the courtroom, presented a case, put it all together, and presented it to a jury. And the jury came back with the verdict that they did, and that's justice working. That's the system working. I think for every man and woman in uniform, whether it's a TPD patch or some other patch, I think this speaks volumes to this piece of cloth that we wear that resonates with all of us, that we do have someone or something bigger than us that is in the background supporting us.
Chief, what does justice look like to you?
Justice is what it is. You let a jury take a case, let them make a decision, and whatever that decision is, you walk away with it. It doesn't matter. This was death, but if it had been life, if it had been life with parole, we would have accepted that. I would have accepted that.
How proud are you of Christy and Craig's son for getting up there and speaking? You know it was tough for both of them.
Yeah, they did an incredible job, and they have, throughout this entire ordeal, have just been rock solid. I don't know that I would have the same fortitude that they have, but they inspire me. They have kept me going throughout this entire thing. Just leaning on one another and gathering that strength, that is what has kept us going day in and day out. And I know I speak for every Tulsa police officer when I say that.
I know this wound will never completely heal. It can't. But do you think this will help? Will this help you? Will this help the officers and the community?
I think it helps the officers by letting the officers know that the community still supports them, that they stand by them, regardless of some of the things that may happen in other parts of the nation. At least in this community, our officers know that they're supported. So we will take that in stride. Right now, there are officers out here on these streets taking calls and responding and dealing with very difficult situations. They are doing that right now, and they would be doing this whatever verdict would have come back. They would still be doing that job.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it, Chief. All right, Laura, I'm going to step over here for a second. You just heard from Tulsa Police Chief Wendell Franklin, along with Christy Johnson, Sergeant Craig Johnson's widow, and District Attorney Steve Coonsweiler. You can hear from all of them how much this case impacted not only everybody involved in the courtroom, but the whole Tulsa community. Chief Franklin talked to us the other day, and he said this was something that impacted the whole department, but all of Tulsa. And the same with District Attorney Steve Coonsweiler said that this was something that impacted everybody, and he's so proud of all the officers and all the officers who had the bravery to get up on the stand and testify. The young officers. Prosecutors argued today in their closing arguments before the jury deliberated, right before, they said today is about accountability. They say David Ware, this is the only time that he has been violent with police, and this needs to be the last time. And then they asked the jury to sentence Ware to death, and they did just that. But Lori, as you know, there's several steps for the death penalty even be on the table in a case like this, and the jury had to go back there and make sure that the prosecutors proved beyond a reasonable doubt 5 aggravating factors that basically raised the level of this murder to a different level. And the jury came back and said yes to all 5 of those. One of those was that Craig was a police officer, that this crime was heinous and cruel. One of those was that the suspect would have a great risk of injuring others, and they came back and said yes to all of those. So as you can see, very emotional right now. But right now the plan is to move forward, and then they'll do formal sentencing for David Ware on May 13th. Lori?
Reagan, thank you so much for that live report. We loved hearing from all of those folks just right then as it was happening. We appreciate your coverage of the trial. We'll have more tonight at 9 and 10.